everyone. So I did just learn that this is a NASA Day of Remembrance ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery in D.C.
So the memorials. Can we drive over there after we're done?
It's over to your team there. I mean, I'm sure they can make that
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I would.
All right.
Good.
Let's walk around.
Gus Grissom's from Indiana. I've been meaning to get over here. Okay, we ready? Yeah, we're just going to go up here to the podium.
Take your hand. Get some help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Here's fish. It's important.
So those two over there,
Those other two memorials close.
it's a draw.
They want to come with us? Do they want to come over and stand with us?
They could.
Oh, this way.
Hey, Sean.
Good to see you.
Glad to be here.
This is special. All the time.
It is.
Thanks, Vice President. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you for being here.
Sure. Thank you.
Very special.
Mr. Vice President, could we get a picture with the administrator and the Vice President?
I'd really like it. Great.
Thank you very much.
Great job.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, sir. Good to see you.
Thanks for being here.
Well, we were just over at the Challenger Memorial and the Columbia Memorial, and you heard me talk about my memories of those events. Of course, you heard about Dunn Elementary. I was in 5th grade during the Challenger incident. Very traumatic in our classroom that day. Miss Powers was crying, and of course it affected all of us very deeply when she brought in the television and showed us those events. But it impacted our lives in a significant ways for people all across this country. And then, of course, later, when I was on the aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf in 2003, getting ready to engage in an operation that the president had called shock and awe, we had the Columbia incident, again affecting not just my life, but the lives of all the people on the aircraft carrier. I remember those two incidents like yesterday. What we're doing here is we're remembering Apollo 1. And I'm going to be brutally honest, I have no recollection of where I was during Apollo 1's incident. I wasn't alive yet. But I will also tell you that I know the history. And the history is critically important. A lot of people don't realize what Apollo was about. We were in a contest of ideas between two superpowers, the Soviet Union and the United States of America. And this was a contest of political ideology. It was a contest of technological ability. And it was a contest between who could bring the world into their sphere. And that's what the Apollo program was all about. That's what the moon program was all about. Apollo 1 was just a test. They weren't intending to launch that day. It was just a test. And of course, we had this terrible incident. The bottom line is this: the United States of America put forth every muscle that we had, and we were able to get to the moon first. And we had the vice president at the NASA headquarters just, I guess about a month and a half ago now, not too long ago, and he was reminding us of the Apollo 8 mission, about the impact of our astronauts in orbit around the moon for the first time in human history. And when they keyed the mic on that Christmas Eve, the vice president reminded us that they read from the book of Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And that remark and that reading, Genesis 1:1 to 1:10, was heard all around the world, including regimes where it was illegal to read Scripture, We provided a breath of fresh air. 1 out of every 4 people on the planet heard that broadcast, including tens of millions of people behind the Iron Curtain. This is what NASA is. This is what NASA does. This is the mission for which the Apollo 1 crew died. But here's the news story. The news story is this. Apollo is over, but we're going back to the moon. What the hell? And because of the leadership of the president and the vice president, this time when we go back to the moon, we're going to stay. And we are all very excited about that eventuality. And, sir, we are moving out as a family, as a NASA family, as fast as we can to get that done. And we are so grateful for your leadership. People here know that when President Trump became president, he recreated, I think, a critical function in the United States government, which is the National Space Council. And he put at the helm of the National Space Council the Vice President of the United States, demonstrating how important space is to this administration. And then they followed it up with an increase in our budget of $1.7 billion, which has not happened in a long time, maybe not in my adult lifetime. Your leadership, sir, has been fantastic. We are very grateful for it. This is a solemn day for us, but we remember the purposes for which these folks died. We redouble our efforts when bad things happen at NASA, sir, and you know this. We regroup, we figure out what happened, and we move forward again. That's who we are as a NASA family, and we will continue to do that. Ladies and gentlemen, the chairman of the National Space Council, the Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence.
Don't go far. Great places. All right.
Well, thank you, Administrator Bridenstine, for those gracious words and for that walk through history. To the former administrators who join us here today, Charles Bolden and Sean O'Keefe, thank you for your service. Thank you for your contributions to the great history of NASA. Congressman Frank Lucas, to the Apollo and Challenger and Columbia family members who are here today, who honor us by your presence, and to all the men and women of NASA who are here. It is an honor to join you on America's most sacred ground on this NASA Day of Remembrance here at Arlington National Cemetery. The Bible says if you owe debts, pay debts. If honor, then honor. If respect, then respect. And today, on this NASA Day of Remembrance, we make one more installment in a debt of honor to heroes whose contribution, not just to the United States, but to mankind, are incalculable and will be remembered forever in the annals of the history of this great country. Let me begin by thanking all of you for being here. The nature of my schedule is they couldn't tell you I was coming, but I was looking forward to it. And I also bring greetings from a great champion of American leadership in space, who's been inspired by those of you who serve today, inspired by the heroes who've gone before. I want to bring greetings and thanks to all of you from the 45th President of the United States of America, President Donald Trump. We gather here today to pay a tribute to heroic sacrifice. The men and women who lost their lives leading in America's journey to the stars. They include the crew of Apollo 1, Ed White, and the two who lie in rest just nearby, Roger Chaffee and Gus Grissom from Mitchell, Indiana. It's humbling for me to stand on these hills always But I must tell you that from my first days serving in the Congress, I meant to come by and pay my respects to Gus and these heroes. And I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity on this NASA Day of Remembrance to do just that. I'm a little bit older than you, Jim, so I do remember the Apollo program. And I remember Gus Grissom, how proud the people of Indiana were and are of his lifetime of service. You grew up in Mitchell, Indiana, just not very far from where I grew up. A small southern Indiana town that might not have had a population any bigger than the crowd gathered here. He served in World War II. He worked his way through Purdue University. He fought in the Korean War. He flew 100 combat missions, just over 6 months. And after meeting his required quota, he volunteered to fly 25 more combat missions. But history had more plans for Gus Grissom, when just a few years later he became a part of the first class of American astronauts in the Mercury program. The crew of Apollo 1 endure as giants in the history of space exploration. And their sacrifice on that tragic day may have caused some other nations to cower. But inspired by their courage, America redoubled our commitment to space and a determination to lead mankind into the vast beyond. So we honor them today. We also memorialize today the 7 star Voyagers who perished aboard Space Shuttle Challenger. Dick Scobee, Michael Smith, Judith Resnik, Ellison Onizuka, Ronald McNair, Gregory Jarvis, and, of course, Christa McAuliffe. I know that their remains lie not too far from here, and I haven't told my staff yet, but I'm going by Section 46 before I leave. Breathe a prayer of thanks. We all remember that moment when the Challenger fell, when they reached out and touched the face of God. And we'll ever be inspired by their courage and sacrifice. We also remember the courageous crew of the Space Shuttle Columbia, who are memorialized here and whose remains also lie nearby. Rick Husband, David Brown, Michael Anderson, Laurel Clark, Kalpana Chawla, Ilan Ramon, and William McCool. So close to home to be lost. As the ship broke up, the hearts of the American people broke. And we're right to remember them and Challenger and Apollo 1 today. It's remarkable to think that the men and women whose names we recite today with great reverence had already committed themselves to serve their nation. The Navy, the Air Force, public service. But they didn't stop there. They chose to risk everything to help America lead into the great beyond. They considered our lives and our future more important than their own. They loved our nation more than they loved life. And so we do well as a nation to pause on this NASA Day of Remembrance and honor them. So we mourn with those who mourn and grieve with those who grieve. But we do not grieve like those who have no hope, because heroes give us hope. The life, the example, and the courage that we reflect on, not just on this NASA Day of Remembrance, but every day that we think of this space program, inspires each one of us to ask what we can do to contribute to our communities, our state, our nation. So we honor their service on this NASA Day of Remembrance by recalling it in the confident hope that as they look down from the heavens, that they know that we'll never forget what they've done for America. But I expect that they also are grateful to know that we honor their service by continuing the work for which they gave, as our 16th president said, the last full measure of devotion. And I couldn't be more proud to stand alongside a president and be a part of an administration that is absolutely committed to once again having the United States of America leading in space. In his inaugural address, President Trump said, "We stand at the birth of a new millennium," in his words, ready to unlock the mysteries of space. It's my great honor to be asked by the President to serve as chairman of the newly reconstituted National Space Council. It was actually during the campaign when he first asked me to do it. And he said, "I don't know how much interest you have in space." He didn't know that the only committee I ever volunteered to be appointed to in Congress was the NASA subcommittee. He didn't know that a little boy sitting in a basement looking at a black and white television would imagination be fired, be motivated with pride for a country by the service of those that we remember. He didn't know my wife and I had actually vacationed at Cape Canaveral when our kids were real young, just to go by and see the rockets. So he said, "Mike, there's this thing called the National Space Council. I want to start it after we win this election, and would you be willing to chair it?" And I said, "Would I?" President Trump's brought a renewed energy to this space program, the likes of which we haven't seen in recent memory. And it's been exciting to watch. Renewing our commitment to human space exploration. The President has made it very clear. We are going back to the moon, and once we're back on the moon, the United States is going to Mars. I had the great privilege of being there when last year's new class of astronauts, a new generation of heroes, were minted. Men and women of extraordinary and diverse backgrounds, and who've all answered the call to wear the uniform and to be a part of a new chapter in America's leadership in space. I said to them then, and I say to you now, I know they stand on the shoulders of giants. And they're giants with names of the families that are represented here and all that we've recited today. And those new astronauts, by the way, those American astronauts will be returning to space this year on American rockets. So thank you all for being here. It's humbling for me to be with these families, and an honor to be with so many dedicated men and women of NASA. America is leading in space again. And this new generation of explorers will go inspired by the heroism of those who've gone before. They will go standing on the shoulders of giants. They will go carried aloft by the expertise and the ingenuity of the men and women of NASA and all of our partners. and they will go with our prayers. Prayers that we offer to the families who've sacrificed so much, who are represented here, and to those who may be looking on later. Just know that you and your loved ones will ever be in the hearts of the American people, even so as you're in our prayers today. So on behalf of the President of the United States, and on behalf of a grateful nation on this NASA Day of Remembrance, we honor these heroes, and we resolve to continue their work. Thank you all. God bless you. God bless America.
Speaking of that president, that Vice President Mike Pence mentioned so much during that speech there at Arlington National Cemetery. We got some action.